Good morning, afternoon, or evening, ladies and gentlemen, Allincrypto here, and welcome back, guys, for another daily cryptocurrency market update. If you are finding yourself on my videos for the first time today, don't forget to check out that subscribe button because we drop an update just like this one every single day at 1 p.m. UK time to help you guys stay up to date with the latest and greatest things happening within the crypto space, but also the broader markets. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this video. As always, we've got a hell of a lot to get into. We're going to be looking at a clip of Donald Trump vowing to deny and abstain from CBDCs and not allow them to happen if he wins as president. We're also going to be looking at a clip from Jamie Dimon, of course, the notorious Bitcoin critic, talking about Bitcoin and actually very interestingly accepting the potential of the space more broadly, not Bitcoin, but blockchain, what it can do and the usefulness of it, which I thought was rather interesting. Perhaps he's warming up, certainly not to Bitcoin, but to crypto more generally. So a lot to get into, a lot of clips. I could have added a clip of Gary Gensler that came out recently as well, basically kind of trolling the Bitcoin maxis and saying, isn't it hilarious how you guys want decentralization, yet everyone wanted a ETF, which kind of centralizes it and means that you buy through a centralized party. Rather interesting. But we'll perhaps cover that in tomorrow's video. So do stay tuned for that also. And click that notification bell so you get notified. We've got some really interesting videos coming out tonight as well in regards to just me and the camera talking on a walk about something that is, I think, important and an opportunity. But where I really want to start is with yesterday's event. So yesterday you had the hearing for the SEC versus Coinbase. And I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't listen, I should say, to the whole thing because I just found it so boring. And I think this reflects why what we were looking at potentially playing out yesterday in regards to Coinbase getting a bounce around support and altcoins, finally breaking through some of their resistance levels. That didn't play out. We didn't get the kind of pump that I thought we would off of yesterday's hearing. And I think the monotone nature of the whole hearing and the kind of, I think, lack of clarity from the judge was telling and perhaps a reasoning for it. And we do still, to talk about the macro, have a headwind against us in regards to every central bank is now, and the markets around those jurisdictions like the EU, the UK, and the US, which all saw higher inflationary prints, they're now all sort of readjusting their rates forecast and sort of having a debate about it. And markets don't like uncertainty, they like certainty. The good news for us is we know the historic correlation between rates going sideways, which is where we're currently at and what we were expecting, and the S&P. It typically goes on to put in a new all-time high. So we're still very bullish on a macro point of view. This is just a short-term headwind. As things adjust, lots of resistance coming into play. For Bitcoin, of course, we know we're setting up that right shoulder now, which we'll look at, but also the stock market and many other markets. We're actually looking at Amazon, which we think could potentially be going to $260. Maybe I should do a video on that if anyone is a stock investor and interested, because we got stocks very right last year, and essentially altcoins are doing the same thing this year that they were in the last. So I want to start the video off talking about the lawsuit and looking at some takes on it from, obviously, Paul, the chief legal officer over at Coinbase, and also the Meta lawman, who has essentially given his takes on it. And I think you'll kind of get the kind of monotone nature of the whole thing. Yes, it was important, but there was no kind of real clarity or shockers, I think, in it. But for me, from what I did listen to it, looking at takes, it seemed quite positive for Coinbase overall. And I do think that this will ultimately result in a win. So a lot to get into. Let's dive into the Meta lawman's post where he gives us a summary of it, far better than I could as somebody that got very bored and my ADHD just kind of said, right, you need to go and scribble on a piece of paper or something. You can't just sit here and listen to this. But the SEC versus Coinbase update, the last. So the long-awaited hearing is over. As expected, there was no rulings from the judge. There were no knockout blows delivered by either side, and frankly, not a lot of high points over the course of the 5-hour hearing, which is why I think the markets didn't really react in the way that they did. I was expecting more out of it, given what we've seen in previous lawsuits. So the judge was the star of the show, I agree. She was exceptionally well prepared. She had a draft 14-page of questions for the hearing. She understood the terminology and the technology. She is the kind of judge we want to handle cases of this magnitude. I agree. There was some interesting banter about the relative merits of Judge Rakoff's ruling on the Terraform Labs case and Judge Torres' decision in the Ripple case. Both judges worked in the same building with Judge Thaler. But the judge gave nothing away in terms of how she viewed the reasoning of each of those cases. There was a general consensus that tokens are not, in and of themselves, securities. This was said, but the SEC argued, nonetheless, the transaction of tokens on secondary trading platforms like Coinbase can still constitute sales of investment contracts. The SEC lawyers were better prepared than when they were caught flat-footed in July and were generally effective making their case. I did think that. It's really grey. The whole thing's extremely grey. So to read on, the lead lawyer of Coinbase, William Savitt of Wachtell Lipton, was methodical in his approach to answering the judge's questions. Each side was given a few minutes of summation time to say whatever they wanted at the end. And in that space, Savitt definitely stepped up his game and finished with some very strong closing points. I watched the judge carefully. She is either genuinely undecided about how to rule or she is a great actor. The one message I took away was she is uncomfortable with the idea of dismissing the case on the basis of the major questioning doctrine. So the major questioning doctrine, very, very, very quickly, just essentially is there to police governing bodies and say, are you overstepping the mark in your jurisdiction? Anyway, so my guess, and it is just a guess, is she is going to allow the case to go forward to discovery. So there's no motion to dismiss yesterday, like the Ripple case, which could go on for a period of time. But I continue to believe, as noted in my previous tweet, that Coinbase will ultimately win the case in the end. Congress, of course, could put a stop to the whole thing with the adoption of a comprehensive crypto legislation, which we don't currently have, but that won't happen this year. I expect the judge will issue her written decision on the motion within the next 3 months. Not legal advice, you get what you pay for. And then, of course, this was Paul, the chief legal officer's take on it. Today, we made arguments in our motion to bounce the SEC's suit against Coinbase. After hours and hours, this much remains clear. The SEC continues to claim broad authority over all investments while offering no limiting principles to its definition of investment contracts. The SEC cannot unilaterally expand and redefine its own regulatory ambit. This should be left to Congress and the ongoing legislative discussion and regulatory framework that are currently taking place. So Coinbase does not offer securities. We are confident in our legal argument and look forward to the decision that will bring much needed clarity to the industry. We appreciate the opportunity to present the case. So interesting, again, lackluster nature. We were looking at the likes of Coinbase, which we'll show you very, very quickly, and expecting a bounce at some point. And I still am expecting that. It might just want to come a little bit lower down. So we've taken off the smaller head and shoulders that we had down here that gave us this target where we perfectly ran into. We've now drawn the bigger one. So in the same way that this is a neckline down here, and obviously you can just sort of see the head and shoulders. I'll draw it in a squiggle very, very around this neckline. You can see that in the same way we broke up, you come back for a retest. When you break significant resistance, typically you come back to retest. So this is what we're looking at. I think it could be on the corner, and lots of altcoins were sort of setting up to break out of resistance levels, necklines, whatever it may be. But I think all is good. You know, we're still forming this right shoulder, which I think is going to be a lot more shallow. People always get way too over fearful, I guess, from a content creation point of view. It sells, but we're still waiting for this right shoulder to form, which I do think is in play. That could predict $150 plus $1,000 Bitcoin price. And there is a lot of macro uncertainty about the place. So first place, I think, for me to start is with a clip of Donald Trump. And we are trying to be as apolitical as possible on this channel. So this is not a shilling of Trump. If that is your view, me just sharing something that's very relevant to crypto and to the industry as a whole and to all of our lives with you and one of the potential presidents talking about it. If that offends you, this channel probably isn't for you and you need to toughen up a little bit, quite frankly. So we are going to play a clip of Trump talking about how he's vowing against CBDCs. You've got to be very careful with politicians because they often say a lot of things to get elected that they don't follow through on. But it's certainly very interesting. And then we're going to close things off on a clip of Jamie Dimon. Not too technical today because we've covered a lot of the technicals. Remember, we're just waiting for Bitcoin to set up. Altcoins look great as far as we're concerned. And we think that the plan, generally macro, micro, technically is still in play. We are bulls. Hence the bullish cow with Bitcoin laser eyes in our thumbnail. So let's go ahead and play this clip of Trump vowing against CBDCs, which is extremely interesting. I don't think he's going to get very far with that. This is the plan. CBDCs are the agenda. The Internet of Things is coming. The Internet of Value is here, so on and so forth. But let's play it.
Tonight, I'm also making another promise to protect Americans from government tyranny. As your president, I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. Do you know about that?
Pretty huge announcement, actually. And, you know, I'm with him on government tyranny coming from CBDCs. It's all about surveillance, it's all about control. The government has well overstepped their position, their role. And now, you know, we live in a world where most people are completely dependent on the government, and this is all by design. Very interesting. I don't think he's going to get very far on that. However, that is, I think, an interesting campaign point for his election. We've seen lots of pro-crypto people. I don't think Trump is particularly pro-crypto. He's launched a number of NFTs. But it's going to be interesting to see if he did win, how that would play out. Let's now go over to, of course, Jamie Dimon, the infamous Bitcoin critic, talking about Bitcoin again and the crypto space more broadly. And I think there's some positives to be taken away from this.
Cryptocurrencies, there are two types. There's a cryptocurrency which might actually do something. Think of a cryptocurrency as an embedded smart contract in it, and that we can use it to buy and sell real estate and move data. That may have value.
The idea of tokenizing things.
Tokenizing things that you do something with. And then there's one which does nothing. I call it the pet rock, the Bitcoin or something like that. And so on the Bitcoin, you know, there's, first of all, and I'm not trying to make a joke here. There are use cases, AML, fraud, anti-money laundering, tax avoidance, sex trafficking. Those are real use cases, and you see it being used for hundreds, maybe 50 or $100 billion a year for that. That is the end use case. Everything else is people train among themselves. So
speculate.
Yeah. Now, okay. Now, my last statement, the last time I ever talk about Bitcoin, is I defend your right to do Bitcoin. I think, you know, it's okay. I don't want to tell you what to do. So my personal advice is you don't get involved. But I don't want to tell any one of you what to do. It's a free country.
What do you make of BlackRock? What do you make of the other firms, the BlackRocks of the world that obviously, and Larry Fink changed his view of this, obviously. Yeah. And maybe he changed his view because you think he genuinely believes in Bitcoin, or believed it because he thinks that there's a marketplace for it and he wants to be part of that market. But what do you think of there's about a dozen big financial companies, Fidelity included.
Number one, I don't care. So just please stop talking about this shit. And I don't know what he would say about blockchain versus currencies that do something versus Bitcoin that does nothing. And maybe that's not different than me. But, you know, this is what makes a market. People have opinions. This is the last time I'm ever going to state my opinion.
Gold really didn't do anything either.
Yeah, but gold's limited in supply.
So is Bitcoin.
And it's been used. So you think so, huh?
I do.
I think there's a good chance that when we get to that 20 million Bitcoins,
they go to 42.
No, that Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet, all Bitcoin's going to be erased.
I think, man.
How the hell do you know it's going to stop at 21? I've never met one person who told me they know for a fact. They take that
mathematically, it's not
exceptionally interesting, and I find myself in part agreeing with Jamie Dimon. You know, I think he's a little bit harsh on Bitcoin. I think he sort of missed the point here. You know, people say Bitcoin's not backed by anything, and you know, neither are fiat currencies. And they'll say, well, the fiat currency is backed by the might of the United States or the might of this country and that country. What people don't realize is Bitcoin is actually backed by the people behind it, which is us. You know, this is a real movement. I see a use for Bitcoin, an alternative system of accounting for store of value. The point he ended up on, so to finish, he then said, but there's two types of cryptocurrencies. You've got useless ones like Bitcoin. I don't agree with that. And then you've got like ones that you can actually do things with. This has always been something that I've said. You know, we are more interested in the fundamental changings of the world that are going to be implemented through this technology. And we're interested in that as an opportunity. But towards the end of his comment, he says, how do we know that there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin? How do you know that? Because technically, and don't just take my word for it. Go and look this up. We say things we can back up on this channel. You could see the Bitcoin supply increase if it was voted upon. You know, you can also see forks of it. And my biggest concern about Bitcoin is Satoshi Nakamoto. That's my biggest concern about Bitcoin. Because who is he? He has 1 million Bitcoin. You know, we saw some interesting things going on with his wallet not that long ago. It's an interesting point, and people might just take Jamie Dimon as being completely crazy on that. I in part agree with a little bit of what he's saying. I think he's totally wrong on Bitcoin, but I think in part I agree with some of what he was saying. And you know, he's very controversial on Bitcoin because his fund is involved with it. So that's really all I've got for you guys. Always a pleasure to speak to you. And yeah, On that note, I'm going to love and leave you. Don't forget to become a patron if you want. We're now adding a number of very small altcoins, looking at some really big opportunities that you guys can get on board with. And on that note, I'm going to love and leave you. Go and check out allincrypto.com. Come follow me on Twitter, and I will see you all in the evening video.